Anje Chudan Doji Janamla, Shanja Bada Dana Jansamji, Dari Chishi Jebe Son, Rola Benjara Sanjendra Bashu, Sanje Chudan Doji Janam, Shanja Bada Dana Jansamji, Dari Chishi Jebe Son, Ola Benjara Sanjendra Bashu, Sanje Chudan Doji Janam, Shangcha Bada Dana Chasam, Dagger Chishi Jepe Sonam, Rola Pinja Sanjendra. Hey, good evening. Good evening, guys. Good morning. You going to hear me? You can hear me?
Yes, Geshe, thank you.
Good. Hey, Karen. Hello. Hi, Chelsea. You're late. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just go to. I'm just okay, job. Okay, job. Okay, job.
Oh, good.
Whether here, right?
You can hear?
Yeah. Everyone here? Good. Now time to go one lazy way. Okay, anyway, it's a wonderful everyone about to study tenets. It's it's not easy. Everyone here, right? It's not easy to understand. Boring or bore.
It could be boring.
Yeah. Boring, very. But in order to study really well, we need to know with the last one, person. In order to their view become correct, we need to know all the steps. And also, this is like education, how Tibetan Buddhism to believe the view or different ways. Also, this is one of the Buddhism science come from here. Therefore, one end is why we study that, but secondly, this is very important. In monastery, first they study 3 years to study for the colors, shapes. They open your like wisdom, the key. There's so many debates. And after they teach ground and path, then they teach this one. The one year 4 years they will study this one. If you go to enter become enlightened, you need to know all the views, all the different stance. Therefore, it's very important text, but it's also it's here what we have the book. It's a very short, not very big. But also I don't want to go you guys to all different books, different commentaries, then basically you're more confused. Okay? I try to teach for even I'm reading different books, but I'm not going to that way. I just put together, put here. Therefore, all the tenets, they all even they explain, they're not the same way. Therefore, what I explain according to like Geshe Tenley, then I follow that way. Then some other schools or monasteries also not same experience. Therefore, if you are very smart, you can look at. Otherwise, you just go to one. Otherwise, you try to all different books, different traditions, different ways to explain that you become just, how you say, just blow up, okay? Therefore, you catch one. Remember, I say when you have look 100 fish here, we go to catch one fish. It's I want one. Everyone just try. Finally, you don't get anyone. Just catch one. According to Geshe Tenley, say like that way. Just go that way, and you will find you can go to Tibet everywhere. of course, you are enough to it's a smart or wisdom, you can read all the books. But sometimes the different authors, different commentaries makes you more confused. Okay? Like that. Anyway, I'm going to put this one also. Okay, well, let's see. Therefore, everyone has a good motivation to benefit all Mother Sanctioned beings. Therefore, I'm going to study this to benefit for anyone, or myself or others. Always motivations very important for any Buddhism practice. Therefore, it's very important for all of us. Good motivation, and our practice become more powerful or not, or Mahayana practice or not, it depends on our own motivation. Therefore, even same action with different motivation and merit, okay? Like that. And I'm not talking too much. We're going to start to the tenets, okay? We already talk about when they start the tenets, then why we got so tenets, how long Buddha's teaching survive this world, and we discussion or the definition, how many different ways to become, Buddhism, and we discussion about definition, the Buddhism, and we have also different categories like that. Now we are the first one. What's a Bhavashika? Bhavashika, right? Bhavashika. Very good. Samdodeva. Masamsama. That's all. Trinidata Kazan. Kazan also that in my Mabush. That's Shirame Sini thing of the Shuta.
So we already talked about the definition of Vaibhashika school, right?
Right? We did right. That in a session chico Kashi Durawa. And at the end, Rari Mendes said in the Chich. Sure, tend to travel the person niche. And the Hemiji Tandama was it. There's some the Nangasum kid.
And so then in the definition, right, of the Vaibhashika, it says the definition of Vaibhashika, one who propounds the Hinayana tenet. So there are 3 points, right? One who propounds the Hinayana tenet, and who asserts external object to be truly existent, and who do not assert self-cognition. So those 3 points are important to understand, important to remember. And so it says that does not assert self-cognition. So those who assert self-cognition, it says that it is important to have that. Otherwise, the mind which cognizes or which apprehends the higher consciousness which apprehends a base, will not be able to apprehend, will not be able to recognize the base properly if there's no self-cognition. It's like two good friends meeting with each other. When they want to meet with each other, they don't need a third person to introduce them, because they know each other very well. But if they don't know each other very well and they're meeting for the first time, then they need a third person to introduce them. So it's those who assert self-cognition is like that.
That's better. Now, page over the television. Sharama take up and a long low current silver chaga, young look chambers go mares or Tindos.
And then the Vaibhashika is saying that there's not necessary to have self-cognition. Just like you don't need a light to illuminate the light.
or the Jinse Tende, Mota, the Jinsam Tendelation, Kanji Rani Go Mares, and the Bena Pumban Mishitavana, Korangi, Rarimeva, Korangan.
And so there's so therefore it says the Bible says there's no necessary to have self-cognition. Even if there's no self-cognition, the eye consciousness apprehending ways will be able to cognize the ways.
다 쇼로 텐데 트바마 덴바트바 세테 간제 데테 참멜레 서비 라바 네 덴바트바 아니 랑 토모모 델링온데 트바 켈렘바자 쇼로 톤데 트바 켈렘바스라 그래
그래서 드든 타모 서면
데테 참메 서비 라바 데 참모 서비 라바 오데 덴바트바 켈렘바는 쇼로 톤데 트바 켈렘바스
and then the asserting the external object is like so anything that is formed by amassing, by bringing together or amassing on a partless particles together, and that's called the particles together. So that existing truly, is called external object. Asserting the external object to be truly existent.
택매지 전담하와 세대가 된지가 근데 쇼로 되는 덴바트바딘 콜로 담보까지 송바데 대 송바다나 켈링에 된지가 나 전담하고 가다나 택매지 전담하와스
콜로 담보디
콜로 담보 가다다 쇼로 되는 덴바트바 마와나지 켈렘바 로타라 타지네 켈렘바나 택매지 전담하와스.
And then the propound, the one who propounds Hinayana tenets, right? So it has to be a propounder of Hinayana tenets. So and according to this, it will be like in the first turning of the world of Dharma, everything is asserted to exist truly from its one side, and so so therefore it has to be someone who propounds the Hinayana tenets.
미야만나 시당질라 간지 추지 다드 트바 아니 덴바트바 아니 가로 마위기 마와다 켈렘이 강산다 템지된다 마와세 그러.
And so just as it is said, in the first turning of the world of Dharma, accepting or asserting in exactly as it is said in the first turning of Dharma. So that one is called the proponent of the Hinayana tenets. Or you can say, so the one who asserts things to exist truly, or to exist as a self of phenomena, and as truly existing, and that's called just as it is said that to accept that or to assert that is called a propounder of Hinayana tenets.
어제 대시 다 대다 캠 melengedala 아니 대신 저다 마와스 저다 마오치 바이바치.
So those who do not assert that, is the proponent of the Mahayana tenets. And so the same being proponent, but one propounds the Mahayana tenet and one propounds the Hinayana tenets.
뭐였다? 아니 간이 쇼로 된다 맞아봐. 주지 담에 야만나 주지 다도 맞아봐 켈랭에게 이제 전담에 가다라 대신이 전담 마와스. 주지 다도 잡아 켈랭에게 전담 모델 데미지 아니 전담 마와스.
So the propounder of tenets, who propounds the things to exist truly, or as a self of phenomena, then that is the propounder of the Hinayana tenets. And those who do not assert the things to exist truly, or as a self of phenomena, is the propounder of the Mahayana tenets.
그래? 어디 다 되지? 다대 전담 대신지 전담과 태미된다. 다 오나 대신지 강사다 대신지 전담에 가서 채원 되니 bed콘 로그에 채워 치보요레스.
And so now that is the difference of the Hinayana tenets and the Mahayana tenets, right? So the one who propounds the Mahayana tenet and one who propounds the Hinayana tenet. So that's the difference of that. And usually when we talk about the Mahayanist and the proponent of the Mahayana tenet, those two are very different again.
다 대신지 강사이나 대신지 전담을 가서 말해.
So if you are a Mahayanist, then it is not necessary to be, to be one who propounds the Mahayana tenet.
다 데미지 가다이나 데미지 전담하고 가다이고 말해.
And same, with the Hinayana. So if you are Hinayanist, then it is not necessary to be one who propounds the Hinayana tenets.
데미지 전담하고 가다이나 시라마보다 도대와 가니고 그래.
So if you are the one who propounds the Hinayana tenets, then you have to be either Bhavashika or a Sautantika.
다 데미지 가다이나 되고 말해.
But if you are a Hinayanist, then it's not necessary to be that.
뭐야? 다 대체제 전담하고 가다이나 샘도마도 오마와 가니고 그래.
So it's in the same way. Then if you are one who propounds the Mahayana tenet, then you have to be either a proponent of the Madhyamika school or the Chittamadan school.
예, 아다고 송아.
You understand that?
택첸다 택메세데 고 전탁제 말에 고 샘자치종은 지와인 거래. 샘자치종 로자치종.
So the Hinayana and Mahayana is not differentiated by the tenets, rather by by the broadness of the mind.
다 샘자치요세 샘자치모 상주고 샘 영이들라 대화 침보 샘자치모 상주고 샘 명예기 들라네 다 대매세는 거로.
So the broadness of the mind, like a broadened mind, is the Mahayanist, and that who doesn't have a very big broad mind, is the Hinayanist.
다 디긴 세절에 들이 작으면 땡어도 슈마티고 돌리셔야다.
So that is the definite. I mean, like the example. We apply that, but we can still discuss further on that.
다 되죠. 다 시라마가 옛날 아니 가지 시라마가 요거봐 예비지다 단도서 코나서 대사 사작 지원이고요. 대가도 감사히 봤.
And then division, of the Bhavashika school, like it says here, the Kashmiris and the Aparantakas and Magadas. That's differentiated by the location or the geography.
내가 대파여봐는 아니 시라마가 내가 좁제다지 간쇼인 말이.
And then if that is divided, I mean, if that is expanded, then it can expand to the 18 schools, of the sub schools, of the Bhavashika school.
아니 그도 내가 좁제 가는지 차선을 세워야나 아니 지 개개 만들어 가지 아니 지 개모 만들어 왔던 레전이가 그가 차선을 말이.
So why they had a different and all these different the divisions, of the school, is because of the different teachers. They had.
아니 그도 돈데 갈아야 돈데 담아다 가시기 아니 상게 가시기 예마라지 가시기 샤제까지 가시기 빨리까지 아니 되다 말아지네 그가 차선 말이.
And then also from the way they recited, the sutra. The sutra is the teaching that's given by Buddha, and that was later recited by the disciples. So those because of their reciting the sutra in different language, then there came different schools also. So some recited in Sanskrit, some recited in Pali language like that. So there came different ones.
아니 대화점이다. 쇼코도 좀 잠못 차와요 말이.
So the later they all became one or became harmonious with each other.
그래서 나 그도 산지 좀 전에 루데와 같은 아니 배전에 루제더라고. 미 맨날 레우직 맨날 레우직데 무접적 거바이나 소소소 참말로 소소 깔아를 톱고 와데 루데와 말.
What is?
레우직 무접적 고쳐 잡아이나 무접적 참말로 소소 거야를 톱고 와. 산지가 다 배전에 루데와 말. 루데.
So that is because Buddha has emphasized, in one of the sutra, one of the scripture, that when so like for example, if you have a piece of cloth, if that piece of cloth is divided into 18 parts, then each one will get one part of it.
다 뒤가르나 대화 좁제 레바나 대화 좁제 때 수소 라나 수수는 고야기 가지 저람 레버스 게 남자리 안에 냠내 체지 요와 단 통거를
And so that's like each one will get one, a part of the cloth, right? Just like that. And so, so each division of this 18 division, each of these 18 division will have everything, for them to do the practice. So the basis, the path, and the result, all from each division.
제가 상제가 먹어봐 루데가 먹어봐 드린드린드리 용거리다 드네진의 롱몽부 땡기거래.
And so Buddha can prophesy like that. So it says what is going to happen in the future. So it says, this will happen in the future. So he prophesizes like that.
저도 로에 땅에서 어디가 아니 로지 고뇨에. 로에 땅 바보로 가로. 아연데요.
I don't know.
인간라 다.
I love that. I don't know. 그들 말에 가래. 파발하래.
어떻게 나도 로딱 그런 나와 마찬가지로 땅에라 그러. 가지 그 남바도 쩨잡 아니 남을람 풀. 근데 마숨 아니 코 뺀데
무디다.
겁니다. 아 단다 코 뺀데나 쩨지 아니 그 개발나 데블로지 아니 얘나도 산지 롱대더러 마음바나 밑에 땅에서 용거리에서 담보고 되네 그 마음을 제전에 그 남발에 쉬고도 거라고 때 돈에 그 나줄 때가 좋아래. This story, one story. One of the Indian master is non-Buddhist. Okay.
It's a non-Buddhist master who became a Buddhist later, and then became a very great scholar in Buddhism. And so his name is Mutik Taya, and so it's one of the Mutik. Is one of the non-Buddhist school. So it's called Trithika, in Sanskrit. And so he had a debate with Aryadeva, and then he lost the debate. So whoever loses then has to follow the other person's religion. And so because he lost, so he has to become a Buddhist, but he didn't want to become Buddhist. So they, captured him and then put him in the prison. And then when he was in the prison, they made him to recite these scriptures. So then every time when he was reciting,
he put the library. He put him into the library.
Yeah, and then every time he would recite the scripture, and then he would take one page and then recite it, and then put it under his bottom, and then take another page and then read it, and then put it under his bottom. And then because he didn't like it, and he was just playing with it. And then as he was reading, and then he saw one page which says that would mention his name. And then so that's going to be this non-Buddhist scholar called Muditaya, and he's going to become a Buddhist, and then he's going to become a very a great scholar in Buddhism. And then he read that, and then he was so surprised. Then immediately, he had this very strong remorse, for doing what for putting the scriptures under his bottom. And then immediately then he confessed. Then that's what the general confession, the general confession prayer, that was composed by him. And so like that, Buddha, subdues or brings many disciples into Dharma by prophesying about them.
Okay, I'm not talking too much. Okay, that's what the job jay, but they should do on the day. That in issue of that's some Jashin, Kare Sharama, Kajan Sharama, Lavna, Shara Chembo, Shara Shente Chembo, Sharama, Tejuchat, Ruruchini, Dachuba, Nibet, Ruruche, a Chembo, that thing is the Doma that you Sharama Lagades.
And then, so the etymology, it says, why is so and so is called such and such like that, huh? And so it says, if someone asks why they are called Vaibhashika or particularist, it is because they propound the tenets following the great details explanation by Mahadevasa, and also because they propound the three terms and instance of substances. And so because they follow this a great explanation by Mahadevasa, and therefore therefore they are called particularly this this scripture, and therefore they are called particularist.
Oh, Chita Yamana and the Java Yamana Tism Tismji and the jet Sharad Mama Sharama was Kaji Tism, Deba Maomba Tata was on the Zeji Sharad Mavanda Sharamala is. They touch Rama Sheta Toma Imagine.
And then all they propound the 3 times as instance of the substances, and the substances therefore is called the Vaibhashika.
That dig Tism Deba Maomba Tata Tanda Tanda with the Yores at the corner Tomoma in bed. That the only.
Because of Tusum did Tata and Yores.
And it Deba Maomba Tata and it Tata with the Yores, teaching the Yores.
So they are saying that the 3 times, right? That the past time, the present time, and the future time all exist in the present time.
Aditi order like thing to the old Shijatana Jam Hochirwa.
So there will be more explanation on that later. But we'll have more discussion later on that. At that point, we don't have to talk about that right now.
Aquajalat Kaji Sharama was the water Tisum Josum Tomoma in Basi Kukuresi, or Tomoma Mir.
So what you have to understand is that the Vaibhashika has a particular way of explaining the 3 times. So that's why it's also called the particular list.
다 저와 사제 저와 드셔도 응부트니 응보 여와 시잖아 되지. 단 내 사람에 토모만 바지. 단단하도 하고 거야 돼. 니반에 사람하고 코나가 토모만 가르가르 너 대다 하고 거래. 내산이 양도로 가서 마다 하고 거래.
And so then it comes to the mode of asserting objects, right? So it's in the definition of thing. Is that which is able to perform a function. It's a thing. Thing, existent, and object of knowledge are mutually inclusive. So this is the uncommon, mode of assertion, of the object by the Vaibhashika school. So what do they object? What do they assert? What do they like? They say the thing, and the existent and object of knowledge are all same. So this is according to the Vaibhashika school. So you have to understand that. You have to remember that, because later when you come to the other school, they will have a different mode of asserting the objects, right? So in each school have their one way of asserting it. So you have to remember that. So then you will be able to see the difference between those schools. And then there are 2 divisions of things. This is a permanent thing and impermanent things. For example, of the permanent things are like non-compounded space, non-analytical cessation, the example of permanent things.
And the Zuche Kong Gaba, Zuche and Papation Makawa.
And so the non-compounded space, the space, is like empty, inside even inside the room, right? You have this empty. And so therefore the physical or the visible objects, can move around. When they move around, it doesn't get obstructed, so that's because that is because of the space. Because there's a space, therefore you can move around. In other words, the space is like the non-obstructive.
And then
And then they're saying that space, is a thing, and that which is able to perform a function. So if it is able to perform the function, then it has to be able to do something. It has to be, able to make some use of it, right? And so what function, what functions does it perform? Is that it performs the function of not obstructing the objects. So it's saying that it is a prominent and it's able to perform a function.
You got it? 오케이. 다 소소 딴 것도 소소 딴 거는 가려고 지금 하고 왜?
And then it's analytical cessation and non-analytical cessation. Do you know what is that?
소소 안에 님보 안에 담에 지금비 답지 먼저 쇼때 안 고바 까봐 차들은 고발라 그래 소소 딴 거라래. 소소 또배 싫었지. 와? 담에 가르지 또배 담에 가르지 또배 소소 또배 싫었지. 아니 지가로 님보 봐 까비차. 아마나 빵위차 들은 소소 딴 거스.
So the analytical cessation, is a cessation ceased by meditating on like selflessness or emptiness. And so when you cease that the opponent, of the emptiness, by meditating on emptiness, so that cessation is called analytical cessation. You understand that?
다 돼야 되신다 말이지.
So that one is also, the one that's also a thing that is able to perform a function.
아디 대가지 배나 아니 묘모 셴바치 마요 와체 대 빠까셔레스 배나 소소 빠까워서로 다
So what kind
고대오라지나
of function can it perform? It can perform the function of avoiding the delusions.
제가 배나 가서 출력을 하바 나 요모지 고바자 고바까셔 돼서로 그래.
So it's just like you have a door to stop the wind from entering into the house. So the function of the door is to stop the wind from entering into the house, just like that.
다 드니로 고고래 다 소소 딴 곳에 드니지 고고요 그래.
So the analytical cessation is something like that.
그래. 냠보 아니 소소 또배 싫었지 아니 빠자 바까비차 그래.
And so with the antidote, the analytical wisdom, so with the antidote analytical wisdom, you you avoid or you and eliminate the abandonments.
다 소소 땀이 거 발라나 저도 인지나라 텐데션도 돼.
So non-analytical cessation, what is that?
Any explain for English?
I think it's more of a temporary cessation, like when the conditions don't exist.
Exactly, yeah, that. That's good. That's good. 알아래. 아니 지 제다 깨지 만테비 차니 아니 나가를 가지 때도 봐. 이어서로 대봐 까우서로 그러.
Without meeting any conditions, and temporarily is kind of being avoided from that. So that's called the non-analytical cessation.
아니 소소 또비 혈압지 따지 바까서 말하고 레시 제다 깨 만테비 차니 바까서 가지.
So without conditions, without any causes or condition, temporarily being avoided from that is called the non-analytical. So analytical cessation would be by by the antidote, like the meditation on selflessness or emptiness, and that avoids or that eliminates the abandonment. That will be the analytical cessation.
간지 빼자잖아. 단다 좀나 대딩이 밑에서 그 레시 깨 만테 본거 사자 달래요 말해서 요 초거리다 레시 깨 만테 봐도 그 사자는 요 까셔로 이소로지.
And so like people who are on the Zoom, because of not meeting with the condition, they are they are avoided from coming to the center. Otherwise they could come to the center.
Okay, then like that, okay? It's not, I'm not saying you get better, okay? But you choda resi te manche bi onge ko te kasha wando teza ko te kawa inza te kabi tension wando te bas.
And so you can come, but because of not meeting certain conditions, you are stopped from coming there. But you can come.
Tirita jo yon sigma ta tirita jo yon masiba ro tirgonda tisingla.
So like today, so tonight, this evening, you will not be able to come.
제가 저도 용하게 见만체 봐 인자 오 디게 따때 용하게 까셔 때라 소소 담은 거 봐서.
And so because you didn't meet with the condition to come to the center, therefore you are like stopped from coming to the center. So that's like the non-analytical cessation.
Okay, that's what I was. Good, clear.
Is that clear?
Right. Okay.
Yes. I have a question. Yes, permanent means unchanging moment to moment.
that they show like and they unchanged your medication body. Konazo. And I shake when I go to you.
So here it's not talking about unchanging, it's talking about performing function.
제가 대단한데요. 단단
딱
코나도
policy, 뭐는 딱 policy 거다.
and 제가 아발라 아니 군 지게 그게 시작이 말해서 그 대셔와는 되게 그럴까지. 제가 딱 받는 지가 몇 가지고 그래. 아까등이요, 그거라.
뭐 값됐어요, 값들.
그래.
값들 답변 거보다 답변 거보다 이어라다. 답변 거보다 답변 캐먹고 샤워. 지금 아직 거는 샤워 말해.
말말. 답이 이보다 뭐 답이 뭐지 지금 아직 그 셔와지. 야, 가지 네가 아니 대셔와니다 아니 뭐 예스라 봐지.
말 뭐이스나다 지금 가서 지금 인자 거 가서 답변 거보다 거라서. 그
야야, 텔레. 야.
그 저번 드려 말하다. 그 좋아 누가 말아.
지금 봤지. 저거 누가 야.
좋아 누가 말해. Yeah. Also, yeah, it is not changing. You know, so the permanent thing doesn't change. Yes.
그 된다 셔와도 그 되지는 맞춰서 못 찾아서 그래.
But because it is able to perform function, therefore it is a thing.
와인다. 뭐 요와는 되지는 봐.
So that's what it says here, right? The thing, the existent, and object of knowledge are all mutually inclusive. Means have the
Okay.
same meaning.
Clear? Not yet.
And that's just from this perspective.
Yeah,
It is
this-
cool.
Therefore, this don't take everywhere, okay? You just need to, okay, why they believe this is their own score. You cannot debate, okay? This is their own score, okay? They are their own reason. They say everything is karwa. 여와이나 무범 차그레스.
Everything that exists, is a thing.
얘나야 내가 안에 따봐도 못 따오니까 요레스. 무보래
So
못
the thing
따봐래
has both the permanent thing and impermanent things.
제가 다 안에 너마치 남가도 수소던 거 수도만 가면 돼. 아니 대신에 봐야래 따봐야래스.
So therefore, the non-component space, analytical cessation, non-analytical cessation are prominent and also a thing, that's able to perform a function.
따봐인 뭐들레스.
So that is a permanent, yet it's also a thing.
그때 하고 싶어. 그런 거 터모면 다 지래. 다 못답인 걸 고샤. 제는 시와도 가로 제와 시와 못답다거든. 아니 못답인 거 그렇게 그래.
And then,
What
so
is
that is their assertion, okay? So that is the assertion of the Avishka school. So that's what you have to understand. That's their assertion.
Well, you answered this. I just want, it doesn't make sense to me, so I had to clarify. So it's permanent.
제가 퍼면서 남중아도 퍼면서 해야 돼. 그 정답 뭐 소소 제당 맞아와 있는데 땡가도 가다 하고 그러고.
Yes. So according to this school, yes, that's a permanent.
아바리 그냥 무보레스.
So that's the permanent, yet it is a thing.
가전에 그 팬도고도 왔다는 거죠.
So why is it a thing? Because it's able to perform a function.
오케이. 양코 뭐 따버리려고 말다야.
But it's not saying it's impermanent.
그래서 따빙 보려고.
So it says a permanent thing.
제가 좀더 강화내가 구조들이 따빙 보다 못 다니는 용어 말했다. 네가 수수 다니도 크루즈 어다 쿠르쿨라 때 따다 하고는 너도 야로나 때서 말을 하고 그래.
But later, when you go to the higher tenets, they will not talk about this term as a permanent thing or impermanent thing. So if it's a thing, then it has to be impermanent thing like that. According to that, so that will be a little bit different. So, but you have to just remember in this school, this is what they assert.
다 아니 못다빙보다 제와 시와 못다바다 was 다된 것도 남이 놓던데와.
And then it says the product, created object, and the impermanent are the example of impermanent things.
다듯이 다야 대라이나 구조대보다 대다대 많이 요스.
And then now the impermanent thing has two, right? Sorry, not the impermanent. There's the thing has two. There's a conventional truth and ultimate truth.
단데도 내 걸어서 남주 전화도 전다 강래 마부 장사하는데 그 말아야 돼. 말아야마다 내가 하고 거기.
And so because you have maybe studied or heard a little bit about the higher tenets, but this is talking a little bit different. So you have to understand this is different, and this is just their assertion here in this school.
아 양이 볼라였나? 운동되면 대단한 반이요스.
So now another way of dividing things is to input conventional truth and ultimate truth.
다 대가래다. 아니 운동되면 되니까래. 좀바가 루차제 수소사바나 란든지 론도비 추스네 바 그도데 베트니. 대전은 범바다 넘버다워스.
And it says the definition of conventional truth is a phenomena which is such that if it were broken or mentally separated into parts, the mind apprehending that object would cease. A vase and a woolen clothes are example.
제가 빼서는 범바로 파자샤와 이마이나 범바들로 매와 차도 그래서.
And so, like for example, if you broke the vase, like the vase, like the porcelain vase, and if you break it, and then when it becomes a pieces, then you will not still think that is a vase. So that the vase, the mind that apprehends the vase is gone. That's what it's called, conventional truth. That's true, right? When the vase is broken, you still think that's the vase? No, right? So the mind thinking that is the vase is gone, right? When the vase is broken.
다 넘버라이트 그만지 받는 가도 카다로 왜 받는 가도 끼티 왔던 데로 내려오시. 뭐 단다레도 코소 파파 but 식샤와나 아니 하텐데블로 내가 찬도 그래서 범바 넘버 다버스.
So like a cotton cloth, the cloth, that is made of what? Threads, right? When you separate each thread, from that cotton cloth, then the cloth, it will be just a pile of ropes, or the strings, right? It will be just a thread, pile of thread, there will be no cloth, right? So that mind apprehending that as a cloth, would be gone when it is separated, by thread by thread.
다테 빼테 다테 나지다나 가도 카바 고기고가 팔레샤와나 카바를 라고 말와.
And so just like that, when you pull down the house, right? When you break the demolish the house, the roof is gone, and then the walls are gone, and the windows and the doors and everything is gone. When everything's pulled down, then you will not call that house anymore.
아베 대대잖아 빼대듯이 집바드다 모타다 가와나 다 빼샤쇼를 가와나 빼샤.
So just like that, you can apply it to everything that is made, by bringing all the parts together, like car. The car, when you have all the pieces separated from the car, then you will not call it a car. You will call it part of the car, but not the car.
아 강식 추 강식. 근데 코라마 시야 또 뭐였나 제와나 지체와잖아 코란데 로테 멘동에 강에 받을라 너 군도데 발라 그래스.
And so anyway, so any kind of thing, when it's broken or pull apart, if the mind holding that thing as so and so is gone, then that's called the conventional truth.
다 대다도 받는 요다요. 다 이번에 좀바고 루스서바나 란든지로 문제비 주든 바 대다도 벤체인 세전나 대체 쇼지 참여다 시바드니 참여 맛이 다와 is 안데 요다요.
Now the ultimate truth, it says definition of ultimate truth. So definition the ultimate truth is a little bit complicated. It says a phenomena which is such that if it were broken or mentally separated into parts, the mind apprehending the object would not cease. It says examples include directionally partless particles, temporarily partless moment of consciousness, and non-compounded objects.
다 간지 대체 쇼지 참여해서 간지 다 춘주 간지 대리 추가 명이지라고 하다.
And so it says the directionally partless particle. Directionally partless particle means like very, very small particle, so small that you can't, say which part is, in which direction, which part of each is which direction. You can't. So it's so small. That's what I was talking about. Yeah.
나는 가서 배나 쇼게 기후 갈때도 기후 갈지 텔란도 경우도 텔란가도 녀석이들라 그래.
So like when you in the morning, when the sun rays come into your window, you can see, the atoms, flying in the sun rays, right? And so that's called the atom, of the sun rays.
제가 뒤에 마요 내가 드니 얘들도 마요 내가야 아니 루드스야 직 아니 가로 올라데스야 직 루드스야 직가로 나를 잡잖아 랑것들 아니 루크들 아니 루크들 아니 추들 아니 짜데세 놓고 그래.
And so before that, then there comes this the dust, from the bull, a dust from the goat, and a dust from rabbit, and then there's the dust, of the water, and then dust of the metals.
어제 다 들려가지 주주 다데 주주 들리 주주 될래야 간지 아니 가로 샤도 로도 너 파체사요 말까지 제사명이 되니까 둘이 주주 깨는 거 같대. 사람을 너가 나도 막고 없었다나 같은 노게 하고 뭐.
So this particle, the particles, of this dust, from such and such things that I just mentioned, and so those are so small that you can't say that, oh, this is the east of that particle, or this is the west of this particle. You can't say that, But in general, right, you can say that. But I don't know. Maybe if you look through the microscope, then you can maybe, like enlarge or zoom it and then say, okay, this is like that, but not like that. Well, it's so small that you can't say this is the direction, of this is the east direction of that particle, or this is the west direction of that particle. So that kind of directionally partless particle.
어떤 시다지 야 시다지 뭐지 안에 사지면은 좀 저지 이가라네 죽지 저저 저지 로제 레자는 쇼지네 데데제 근데야 다 주지 시작을 그래.
그래서
나 양한테 단단가도 짜도 내듯이 뭐지 lap서. 근데 시다 지지 야 제다 말아버질라 사지면은 좀 셔 디가라 죽다 저 레자 시드샤네 데데제세지. 야 안에 까지 주지 셔야 돼.
디가르들이
아 대야 제가 지다. 대야 안에 드턴세 지다시다 지다 말아버지.
어허.
까지 들리 지다다 지다 말아 니 가셔 요래 가지 전화가 요도.
간에서는 너는 사지 멜로시다 안에 수다지르자.
오 대시지 다 제. 아니 zudracho
네,
zucho 아니 자요 말 zu치 저치 로제레자 시 엔디가 사지면은 좀 시 되게 되게 엔디가 딱 추주지 콘데시자 요다 가지 네
That's
차상
another way of explaining, about from the four elements, like the earth, water, fire, wind, and then the four senses. So excluding the sound, this is the form, the visible character, the form, and then there's the taste, and then the
레자 feeling
the smell, and then the taste and contact. So those four. So there's no sound. So the four senses, right? Four senses. So all these 8. So 8 of these together. There's explanation, the counting in that way.
어떤 데지나 대체사의 시다 지요 단도 조시다 저거 나가요 이제
And so that's like that, the atom, the partless particle, explaining the way of explaining the partless particle from that, from this four elements and the four senses, So it's explained in the Abhidhamma Kosha.
그거가 이제 주연발라 아니 추다체네야 아니 고카카 체면서 란지로 돌아요 말했어. 도나타 코라코라 메와서 jamais.
And so because this is so small that you can't seize the mind, you can't like, because it's already partless, right? You can't apart it, you can't separate it, right? Because it's partless, partless particle, and therefore there is just because it's so small, therefore you can't part it, and therefore you will not have the mind not apprehending it, when it is separated, where you can't separate.
아 죽지. 다 아니 시바 아니 뒤통수를 지시하래. 시바 통수도 시바 지시하면서.
And then it says, then that's the particles, right? So then now it's talking about the consciousness. It's a temporarily partless consciousness.
다 시바 중간도 시다지나 제was던 마치겠는데 내 제가 갈라야 아니 찾기 지금 주체량은 아니 딱 가르고 뒤에 정도로 사야지다.
And so it's like that, the duration of the snap of finger, when you snap your finger at that time. So that moment, is divided, into like 64. Yeah, so 64.
65.
65.
그러와.
주체를
아니 대세다. 주체량하러. 아니 대세다 직지. 야 숨자의 주체량을 세다 지요래야.
숨자.
야 숨자 주체량아.
So that's one way, it's counting, the moment into 65 moments, and then split moments, and then there's also another way of counting, 365 moments. Split moments.
대고뇨 사고도 빼차잖아. 쇼 자탄 방도 누치 쇼 자탄 바 데브도 숨지. 노데 쇼 자탄 바 숨지. 난 네가라 지 먼저 세가씩 된다고 저서 가도 세가 자지 와 대치 잡아이나. 쇼고 자데 벤다 동보도 니바니 마 이거 부여가 봐라. 강념도 부어 말이야. 그 뒤에서 용거로 와.
So that's a little bit complicated to explain, but like, when you have, let's say you have a book, with 100 pages, right? When you staple it, the stapler, the nail goes through it, right? So it's to us, the moment is so short that we feel like it's all happening at once, but it's not happening once, right? There's a separate moment, going through each pages, right? When the nail goes through the pages, 100 pages, there is first it goes through the page 1, then page 2, page 3, page 4. But for us, it's so fast that you feel like that's one boom, like in one shot. Like you feel like it's one shot, but there is a separate moment, right? For each goes through. So that split moment, of the needle or nail going through from the nail gun, the nail going through the pages, like from page 1 to page 2, page 2 to page 3, like that. So that moment.
얘네 뒤에 두느라 뒤에 두느 쇼여로 와.
That moment is so short, right?
어제 다 되노. 가지 딘데기 시바 안에 다 뒤투투투투 가지 파시에면 그질라 아니 대도도 발라 그래스 그 시험에 와 있나.
That kind of moment, of the consciousness that cannot be, separated like that. So that's called the ultimate truth.
나 저와야 되나 저도 내도 구조 좋은 거야. 내봐 그런 거야. 가지 쇼고 동바 잡섬지 내를 맨다지 쉬나. 한번에 잡아야 로이벌 가가 나도 냠도 로고요. 가가 뒤서 여러 어디 버때 여러. 한번도 니바이 버때 갱그래요. 가네.
Or you can imagine, a shooting with a gun, on the book. You hold the book and then you imagine shooting. Like, the bullet goes through the book, right? So it goes through all these 300 pages, right? So is it going at once, or it's like, there is a time, right, from going through the page 1 to 2 all the way to like 300 pages like that. So that time is so short, right? From page 1 to another one, it's so short.
다 가지 딘데기 시바 뒤투투 파디지는 첫 시험이죠. 그래서 오다 tel라 대단다 발라 그래스. 시바.
So that kind of the time in the moment that it takes, from how long it takes, for the bullet, to go through page 1 to page 2. That's so short, right? You can't even say this much of time, So that you can't separate that. So that's called the ultimate truth.
나한테 대답을 가네 시바 임발라 카가 체명해질라야 대답도 말라고 다 고대 오늘 오셔야 되나.
So in other words, so something that is consciousness but cannot be separated. That cannot be, separated. So that's called ultimate truth.
딩해마디 zu임발라 야 카가 체명이시.
So the earlier one, is the partless particle, is something that is visible of like the form or object, a visual object that cannot be separated.
어제 다 somebody the 맛이 딱 봐인 발라. 양 같이 하면 것이 내 맛이 남고 따블라도.
And then the third one is the third example is given here is a non-compounded object. So that's
어떤 데서 아니
a permanent object.
그래서 고뇨 타고 빼 고뇨 타고 생각도 타고 레라운데 고쳐야 버려. 고뇨 타고 빼래. 빼면서 고뇨 타고 요래. 다들 시라마고 그런 거 틈으면 더 당치래.
So these are very complicated and very not easy to understand, but this is the Babachka's way and of or mode of asserting objects.
저는 내 쪽으로 내 맞아 가 나눠서 배나 민가요네 민가로 소소속이 남지 섬소 말아봐. 소소고 배나 시가 말아봐. 되려오래.
And so this is just like their assertion, So it is possible, and it is all right, to have that kind of different assertion, because like if we have 5 people together in one room, and each one will have a different a view, different mentality or different personality, right? So it is okay to have all these different views and so forth, right?
다 대단한데마다 군소대 많이 되는 산도서 다 되는 거 샤샤. 다들 임베 전세도 아닌 돌에 강하라 주다 로이샤 산나텔로 민주바 본체전도 구독도 이것대 대동 요전 오스탄 네가 간지 그들한테 아니 군소대 봤어야 돼. 아니 람들로 도와 돼 말라 그래서 대 마행이 로 못하고 내가 대다도 말라 그래. 산도다 도도로 하잖아.
And so, in other words, there's, in a simple way, it's saying that when it's broken, that mind, holding it will be gone. Is the conventional truth. When it's broken, the mind, holding it doesn't go away, or will not go away. Is the ultimate truth. So that's what it said in the Abhidhammakosha. It says it's quoted from the Abhidhammakosha. It says from the Abhidhammakosha. A thing which, if broken or mentally separated into other parts, is no longer understood by the mind, such as the pot or water is conventionally existent, and all others are ultimately existent. So, like when you have water in the pot, you say the water in the pot. But when that water is poured into the other other container with the water, when you mix it into other container, then there's no longer the water of the pot, right? The water of the pot is gone already.
다 들리다 다 되나 대선 재선도 지 범바 범비에서 요 범바 범비 데비트에서 요 범바 범바 마오메에서 요 아니오다 차시온데 내 고뇨 사오래 야 사람의 도움을 그런 거 다시래.
So then again, now it comes to the time, right? We talked about the 3 times: the past, present, and future. It all exists in the present. Past, present, future all exist in present. How complicated is that?
안돼 요한가도 대선 시라도 매번에 시라마 말라 봐.
So this is like they're called particular because they particularly assert the 3 times to be present in the present time.
다내 동에 대 아니 다 시라 마에 가고 시라 가고 시스템 다들 간가에 가지 콩콩대까지 되는 것도 그래. 단대 잡아라 놓고 그래.
And so these are this says here. Then the 3 times are asserted as substance because the Bhavishka assert that a pot exists even at the time of the past of a pot, and pot exists even at the time of the future of the pot, and the pot exists in the present.
제가 네 범배 다 드링 가리 드링 내배 범바고 드리 요래 마원배 범바고 드리 다다 범바 드리 요래스.
So the past part exists today, the future part exists today, and the present part also exists today.
제가 대충도 로로서래.
That makes sense?
니나 대코라야 전세 빼 전세 야보 전세 엠버데.
Does it make sense to you? But they have a very good reason to say that.
로. 저도 저도 빼는 저도 레드는 도와요. 샤라마올라 빠네 샤라마 되는 샤라마 지금 말에 군도 카시인도 너다 말아도 그래서.
And so this is because there are many different schools, the sub schools, of the biological school, right? And so they're different. They all have a different. They're different ones. Not all. Not everybody. Not all of them assert that, but some of them they assert that.
Yes, yeah.
Well, can you go back to the example of a book with a bullet going through it?
Yeah.
It's not the book, it's the mind perceiving the book.
So
네, 가서 되게 태블릿 가서 맨다쇼에는 맨다게 두디다 기는 누구라 대비 쇼단 찍는 찍어도 되는데 나대 가서기 나 시가 말았어. 대 쌤 등기 쌤도 걸어 시가 알았어.
어디 쉐브가 대가기 그나 대동의 시바지도 되라고 대학공의 시바지.
Yes, we're talking about the mind that recognizes that speed, that moment.
딘디기 다 대빼로 빼대라 전에 딘디기 시바지 두두 샤거다.
So then the
So yeah, by
logic,
giving that as an example, then we're talking about the mind, like very short, and a temporary mind.
so anything the mind's not aware of is ultimate truth.
그래서
로이 마셔줘라, 로이 하마고도 마셔버디, 근데 더 말했어.
말말 로 마시고 계셔 말이야. 되게 들고 계셔. 로 마시고 시라 로 시 마셔야 말어. 로 시 말라 로데 카체야 말이야.
Yeah, so it's not saying that mind doesn't know, if anything that mind doesn't know is ultimate. Just not saying that. Of course, mind has to know, but that knowing mind, is so small, so short that you can't separate it. So that's why it's called ultimate truth.
오케이. 다 되는 좋아지. 다 지라면 지게 앞에만 다 내봐 못하다 뒤주지 여서 앞에나 세다고 차샤와이나. 나가서 세르게야. 포와지 와이나. 그 포와지 되고 갈라 세르게 포와라 그래서. 다 되게 세르게 포와디 마시지 아니 반가도 가로 플레이도나 아니 세르게 플레이라 그래서. आधे माची इस तरह के झूठे डबो तो कहता है तो ना अन्य तरह के कदा लग रहे हैं शायद कोई शावा करो कोरंग शायद शैतान चले जो रमाई सिर कोरंग जो यो मारे कंगत कंगा सिर तो लामे वाना अन्य लगा चाहिए मारे पे तेने रोक सकते
그래서 두숨들아.
हाँ त्योसम कंगा यो हम तेने के सिर की देवती तला यो रे माहौल पे तला ताता ले यो कंगा यो रे
So now they have a very good reason, to say that the three times, all exist at the present time. For example, like they talk about this, the gold, right? So let's say you have a gold cup, and it's good. When you have the gold cup, you call that gold cup. But when that very gold, you make it into a plate, it's called a gold plate, right? Golden plate. And then the gold, when you make it into a necklace, you call it golden necklace, right? So depending on thing that is made into, it's called that. Otherwise, it says gold, right? The gold plate is a gold, and a gold cup is a gold, and gold necklace is a gold. So that kind of gold exists in all the times.
제가 코 모은제요 말했어 모은제요 말했어
So the aspect has changed, right? But the entity, the nature is not changed.
대 시다 지요 아야 시다 심바질라야 근데 가나 레녜바 사스면 제가 다다 녀한테 왔어 근데 레녜바 다 레야보 사시면 제가 다다 녀한테 왔어 대요한자 아니 콘 대요 말했어
대요 말했어.
근데 레 이거 샤다 기마시 it's very yoga for me 근데 레 삼보 사 셈베긴 제가 다다가도 냐도 왔어 레나마 다다 녀고도 와 대자 아니 딘지기 레트 단다 요면 단다면은 레트 사 제가 녀와요 말했어
나는 가서 니마 사게 레기 제부터 다녀요 그랬어.
오 그만 대sembe 레진데와 다다야 녀한테 와 대자 아니 니마 사비긴 제가 다다 녀는 그만 사비 레트 단다 요레스
And so like they say that then you can experience the result of the past karma at present time, right? Because you have created a karma in the past, and the result of that you experience at the present. right? So they're saying that that karma exists in the present, otherwise you will not be able to experience the result in present.
제다가 시바베나 내 생각에 여 단다 도군도 마음에 있던 너희들이 제고도 이런 단다도 된다 시비가 있다고 단다 차선도 와서 시비가 있. 그 잘라 그러면은 시바도 여때면은 시바지야요 말했어.
드린 게 단다게 쉐바되기
그러나 내가 가르쳐 대화하고도 당가 상인 대체고서 대화하고도 단다 제자마다 하고도 여원서 이 그러면은 시바지야가 말했어.
like the mind, that can remember what he did last, yesterday or last month, like that, and then also the mind can think that what is going to do in the future, maybe in the next day or next month, what it's going to do, and so the mind, exists in the present, because if there's no object, then there will be no mind. The mind comes from the object. Yeah. So if there's no mind, I mean, if there's no object, for mind to apprehend, then there will be no mind.
그래서 우리가 대문으로 와. 조선배나 계산 가르치야 된다 저도 정해도 와. 저도 하고도 선인한테 제고도 저도 삼고도 단당도 제조가 간가 제기도 이거로 와.
So that's true, right? So you can remember what you did yesterday, right? You can say, oh yes, I did this yesterday. You can remember that. And then you can think of doing tomorrow. Okay, so I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that tomorrow, right? So you can think about that. And then you can think, oh, I'm doing this, and now, so you can think all that.
제가 그 샤와 제다가 가다 하면 그거 대수치를 열서 들만 뭐 안 빼잖아 가서 나 내내 가서 지도 지일에는 저와 거기서 전화고 배난 다 저와로 나가서 저와도 와 저와 자리는 지도 지 알려면 아무는 내내 지도 지일해 봐지 저와 도도 지일래네 난 저와 쭉 가서는 지도 쭉에서잖아 거기 와 대가라 찍게 키네 그 쭉에 가서 저와 사잖아 아니 그쭉 나트로도 왔어 그 작아지고 작은 거 그래 동거는 동거 그래 다 됐다 요리야 다 되나 보지 간지 그런 샤워 제당 전에 그 내밥 먹어 말랍지 않으면 그 건가 요래서
So 가서 무슨 걸 요랬어 근데
뒤까지 대선 봐요 그 샤워 제당 차네 그 말아 따셔면 건가 요래서
so from the way it perform the function, it is called this mind or that mind, but it exists in all times. And 간서 너는 당가지야디?
아된 군요 타오리 다대 shum어지 나 앞에 셈바지 되나 아마지와나 부모지와나 그런 거 아마라 때는 그 부모래 아니 그런 거 부모인데 그런 아마 자대 요래서 제가 저는 그 요래 그 내가 샤와 제다가 저는 말아 왔다 하면 요래서 하는 거지.
And then so the other example is like a woman, is called a mother because she has a daughter, and she's called a daughter because she has a mother, right? But she has both mother and daughter. It's just because of different role. She is called daughter or mother, but she has both.
가들의 사람하고 그렇게 범바범에 내비대서요 범바범에 먹은 비대서요 범바범에 다대도 요새대 코로나 진짜 요래 다 콜랍샤래면도.
And so they're like that, that's the reason why the Bhagavad says that the vase of exists, in the past of the vase, and the vase exists in the future of the vase, and the vase exists in the present of the vase.
그 대원으로 전 당기 그 대원으로 자셔도 배나 낭바식이야 범바 속에나 낭바디가 범바 속에 갈라야 아니 그 나바 범바치 대마 시그네야 이 셈바지 소나야 되겠지 안대 마시네 가지고 코 잘라 말을 그 낭바 그런 요요바로 뒤서는 것이.
And so just like we talked about the gold, right? There's the clay. You can make many things with the clay. So when you make a pot, with the clay, it's called a clay pot. And when you make a plate with the clay, it's called a clay pot. So it's because of different things it's made into. It's called different things, but otherwise, they all have the clay, right?
오케이. 아 뒤섬 되지 싫어도 돼서 두스레다.
And so that is what it means, by so when it talks about the three times as substances.
뭐야 땅에 들면 골마야 때 니들은 또 쇼긴다.
Okay.
그래서 땅 골마가 다 가정도 하고 거기 알아를 만들어서 돼 가려내시 하세. Chiro tende traba kareja. Take me to them, but the kind of thing to Tangila, but they do Hakoji.
And so now going back to just revising, what we did, what we talked about. So the definition, that 3 parts we have to remember, right? The proponent, the one who propounds the Mahayana tenets, and who asserts the external object to be truly existent, and who asserts self-cognizance, who does not assert self-cognizance.
Kanji Rari said the killing it with numbers is killing. The numbers go Marison. The numbers are Kanji when the Puzimishita will Pamba Zambalaya and Shiba Shimba Robachego Maris. Rari killing it on the Rari Mena Puzimishi Pamba to Marisa or the number Maris.
So when we talk about the self-cognizer, like the I consciousness which apprehends the part, doesn't need another mind for it to apprehend the part. That very mind, the mind which apprehends the part, can cognize the part itself. But in the other tenets, who assert self-cognizer, says that you need a separate mind, for the I consciousness apprehending the part, to cognize the part.
The Peshana, look away, Sewosala looks like go Maris, look on with this or Petena.
And so it says like you don't need a light, you don't need a separate light, to illuminate the light itself. So the light itself illuminates, the darkness, right? So it illuminates, so you don't need the separate light, for this light to illuminate.
I should then the Taba Kelamba said, Kanji, the take Chames of Rapa, I got Tumo dealing with the Taba Kelambaza, and the Lagres.
And then the asserting the external object to be truly existent, so it's the so any object, object that is made of many particles together, so asserting those objects as existing from its one side is the external object.
Which that Hemiji Tadam Kansa said, Momoya Kanter, Kolo Tambu, Kanson, the Jalanas in Reja, the London, driven up the Kanso, what Dutch by Kelene, and Nyamsalembi Kansa in Baza, Temiji Tadam Kansa said.
And then the one who propounds the Hinayana tenet, is the one like, whoever asserts that whatever is, taught, in the personal Dharma is exactly how it is. So those who, assert that, it's called the one who propounds the Hinayana tenets.
I Shamba the Mother Vajila, and if Tai Sharama Bakajana, and Shirashin the Chimbo said, Dutch by Nebek, Sonchabi, teach you tea, Yamsalembe, and the Telo Ching in the Sharama Balagres, Shatanchip.
And then the etymology, right? So the reason for the etymology is because they propound tenet following the great detailed explanation by Mahabhivasa. So therefore, it is called the particular school, particularist or the Vaivashika school.
And the Yamana Tisam Shirata Margarita Sharama Balagres.
Or because they propound the 3 times as instance of substances, and therefore the particular school.
Ta Yova in a new boy in Gores, Shija in a new boy in Gores.
And then it says anything that exists has to be a thing. Anything that is the object of knowledge has to be a thing.
Oh, the Ta new boy in Taba in Gores, why?
And those that which is a thing and that which is a permanent thing.
I think Muboy Mataba in Gores, that didn't tell you the Lam.
And then there is impermanent things as well.
Ta Kuzu Demba, Tena Demba, Kanji, Soso, Koram Meva, Sosha, and Papa Shana, Koran the below the men, Koram Meva, the below the Meva Charter, Kuzu de Balagre, Temashana, Tena de Balagres.
And so then the difference between the conventional truth and ultimate truth, is like phenomena which is such that if it were broken or mentally separated into parts, the mind apprehending that object would cease. That is the conventional truth. And the mind, apprehend that object would not cease, is called the ultimate object, ultimate truth. Sorry.
Okay, now we go to homework. Okay, last week homework. Okay, who has the answer? Do you guys have answers? What's the first question?
How many possibilities between suffering and nature of suffering?
Okay, first, how many possibilities? You raise your hand, you said 2, 1, 4, 5. How much you guys? 3. Okay, gentlemen.
I say that they're mutually inclusive, so,
Mutually inclusive karo.
no, which means not, which, you can't use that analysis.
Okay.
가려야 돼요.
Deborah.
가려야 돼. 무슨
Dungada, dungawanyila.
알래, 알래.
Iba.
네.
나도
Deborah said 4.
Okay, 4. Okay. Oga said 4. Andrew said 4. Okay. Okay, now who going to say? Marian said 3. Can you give 3?
The three
Okay,
that,
listen, okay.
yeah, the three that I say are the
Mad karma, ta chiyo mara, mishi karo. Mus sumashimana chiyo mara was.
아하.
매일
나 동화 많이 가르쳐 줬어.
야, 동화만이 가져.
So those of you who said 4, right? 4 possibility. So then what is 4 possibility? This is something that is both, something that is neither, and it's something that is suffering but not a nature of suffering, and something that is nature of suffering but not suffering. Right? So 4 like that. So when you say that, so there has to be something that is suffering but not a nature of suffering, right?
Yeah.
That which is a suffering but not a nature of suffering. Can you give an example of something that is a suffering? Example of something that is a suffering but not a nature of suffering.
Wait, you don't have that one.
I don't have that.
Okay,
one, that's
Deborah has 4. Okay, give me Deborah.
But for each years, Maria,
Yeah, Maria.
Deborah,
Who had?
and Maria, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's consciousness. Is that consciousness?
So consciousness is a suffering but not a nature of suffering. That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. And same with Deborah?
I said like a knife.
Knife. Okay.
Harika.
Knife is suffering but not a nature of suffering.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
The consciousness, Moisés Shepherd is Shepherd is Dunga mind. And Deborah another
Okay, Karna.
Dunga is Dunga mind.
Well, the
Okay,
problem is
okay,
I
now
didn't
I'm
really
gonna
know
hear-
what the definition of suffering was. So was it someone who experiences suffering, someone that can cause suffering? If it can cause suffering, then it would be a knife. Can cause suffering.
No,
but
I'm not
a
the
nature.
cause of it. Not talk about that.
What does suffering mean then, the sense?
Like a headache.
I thought it was. Yeah.
Oh,
The
okay.
feeling.
Headache.
Okay.
Headache is a suffering,
Okay.
right?
Okay, I was morning. Okay, it's mind is suffering. Shiba de dunga reva.
So Maria, you are saying consciousness is suffering, right?
Yes. Well, I said consciousness is not in the nature of suffering, but because it's delusions, a lot of delusions, it is suffering
Uh-huh.
right now. That's why I thought that would be
So you mean
conscious.
the delusional mind, not every mind.
Right, the delusion of mind. Like,
Okay.
Yeah, so-
Nyomo same to dungalis.
oh, the,
Okay.
yeah, I guess it is.
This is the thing. Okay. Nyomo same day dunga reva. How about you guys? Is delusion
Delusional
mind
mind
suffering?
is a suffering.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's suffering.
Okay. It's a natural suffering.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you sure?
Yes.
I can see a way where you can say its ultimate nature is not in the nature of suffering, because ultimately your mind can become Buddha. So I can see where Maria is coming.
Okay.
Yeah, but in the context, you have to
Okay.
remember the context was in the second of the 4 seals, which is
Okay.
contaminated pranama.
가로 다 녀모 섬에 가니라고 가니까.
Nyomo도 dunga기 줄어다 dunga는 인식 말하거든.
근데 녀모 샘사 가래. 다 delusion 맞으러 말이 봐.
Nyomo same.
오케이. 다들 임바시. 다들 아니 동아이죠. 동아 말씀에.
This is what the bonus.
Okay. Are you guys said both or you guys different?
I said different.
Is it different?
Mm,
Okay.
Yeah, no, what was the question? I said different than what they said.
It's delusion mind is solving and natural solving both or neither.
or both?
Okay.
Yeah, I'll still go with both.
Okay. 那你讲没说错，你看说错，
Oh,
동아你讲说错瞎说了，
you got it.
the delusion mind.
뭐이스는 말했어요. 뭐이스는 이 suffering nature of suffering 말했어요. 동화는 동화 많이 말이야기.
둥아와 가진 말이야.
동화 많이. Why
가진
is
말.
it? So Maria, why is the delusional mind not in the nature of suffering?
The delusion of mind is not, because your mind is not in the nature of suffering. So without the delusions, it would be free from suffering, right? That's what at least that's what I thought. I thought
So,
your mind.
but delusional mind, is with the delusion, right?
Right,
Delusional
with the
mind is with
delusion,
delusion, so therefore it will be suffering.
Right, but in
Are
the
you-
nature,
are you-
but it's not in the nature of suffering, because in the very nature of that, there's no suffering, right? The mind is not suffering. I thought, I was thinking consciousness, because your consciousness is free from suffering. If it's
Okay.
pure, I thought it was light and pure, pure light and free from suffering. So that's what I thought that.
Okay. Now, Devra, you give you the 4 possibilities. Give the one by one.
I didn't really understand the definitions of what each thing represented, so mine is probably not correct.
No, it's okay. It's not correct. It doesn't matter. You can say it, then other people can make correct.
Okay, so something that's both would be a human that is grieving or unhappy. Something that is neither is an enlightened being.
Say again. Jennifer, that she doesn't hear you.
Something that is
Just give one example.
we just lost it.
Huh?
So something that is both is a human that is grieving or unhappy.
That is both.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Then?
심지어 동화와더라.
And
Which is
neither is an
Dumawati?
enlightened being,
And neither one is enlightened being. Okay.
right?
You
Something
got
that is
my-
suffering, but
Sangisa.
not the nature, excuse me?
Sajid, okay. Dunga means okay.
Something that is
Yeah,
suffering,
mine-
but not in the nature of suffering, I said was an inanimate object like a knife. And then something that is in the nature of suffering, but not suffering is a sense pleasure.
가리 센 표절라나?
인스피레이션은 다다 가사가 저기 다 옹복이 용어에 대화지라. 옹복 용어다 옹복 용어다 가서 미식이 용어에 대화지라다. 나시에다 나 제시 용어 대화지라.
예?
옹식이 용어에 대화지.
아니, 대가래.
예, 동화와 인스 동화만 인스.
그래. dunga 가지 말이야.
So sense pleasure is why is it not suffering?
Because at the time it's enjoyable, at the moment of pleasure, it's not,
그거 용어라서.
but it will change. So it's a nature of suffering.
옹식이 대화 옹식이 용어에 대화지고.
근데 저 대화인데 그 dunga와 가자. 걔는 예외 dunga 말해야 돼.
So isn't that a suffering? Isn't that sense pleasure a suffering, because it's a suffering of change, right?
But at the moment, one's experiencing the pleasure, it's not
Yes,
suffering,
yes.
it will change.
Doesn't matter. Suffering change is not moment suffering, right? Right?
뭐
Suffering change is the moment.
동화 말해서.
제가 suffering change is the
동화 말했어.
동화처럼 말어.
유료 동화 말했어. 유료 동화 용어가 말했어. 유료 대화 용어가 말했어. 내가 동화 용어는 신의 되는 동화 유료 동화 잘했어.
쟤도 빼는 예외 동화다 어디 요즘에 그 대화로 와.
그거 대화를 했어. 그 동화 말했어. 이제는.
쟤도 예외도 등화인데 예외 등화로. 예외 등화에 걸어야.
말다. 뭐시나다 뒤도다 용시 대화 용심의 값을 동화 말했어.
근데 가들다.
제가 동화를 유료든 되네. 신의 유료 동화 잘했어.
대화. Okay. Look,
When we talk about the suffering of change, right? When we talk about suffering of change, like say you are eating food and you're enjoying it, but then you keep on eating it, and then it changes the suffering, right? So, moment when you are enjoying at the beginning when you're enjoying the food, is it suffering? Is it a suffering of change at that time, or later when it changes to suffering, then it becomes suffering or change?
When
Which
it's
one?
later.
Later, okay. So at the beginning, when you're eating food and enjoy, at that time, it's not suffering or change.
Well, we don't
It
know
is.
it is. It is, but we don't know that.
It
generally.
is,
Yeah. But, it doesn't matter whether we know or not. You know, is it or not?
Okay,
Well, then there's nothing that's not suffering. Every single thing is suffering.
Yeah, that's right. So it is suffering, right? So that sense pleasure, you know, it's also suffering because it's a suffering of change.
okay. 둥가를 시바고 그래. 저도 더 하고 그래. 둥가를 인심이 시바고 그래. 누가에는 시바미 잡사고 그래.
So anyway, so for suffering, it is a feeling, right? It has to be feeling. The knife has no feeling. So
Okay.
knife cannot be suffering. So if it's a suffering, it has to be a feeling. A feeling means mind. You know, feeling has to be a consciousness. It's like a
야, 샘지 고로야. 토이고 토와.
like a feeling. You know, the feeling is what? Mental factor, right?
How is that different from
Yeah, that
nature
do-
of suffering? How is it different?
둥가와라 시바이 고 말해. 둥가와라 시바이 고 말해서.
Nature of the suffering doesn't have to be a consciousness.
Oh,
레다
the
녀모
reverse.
엉거시 주나 둥가와라 비차래.
So anything that derives from karma and delusion is called nature of suffering.
나도 저도 지디 나도 로로 쳔 봐. 녀레지 pom보지 둥가와인데 레니 양호 쳔지 라인 봐.
Like our contaminated aggregates.
나도 덴바시
The contaminated aggregates is a nature of suffering because it derives from karma and delusion.
Okay, you got it. Everyone got it clear, right? Got it, Jennifer? 나도 요아. 근데 둥가데 제주절라야. 뭐또 둥가 또 담에 가지 tel야. 녀레지 pom보지 둥가와인데 레니 양호 쳔래 해달라고 그러고.
So when we talk about like the impermanent and suffering, empty and selfless, right? We talk about that. And when we talk about
Yeah.
that, we say why is it suffering? Because it derives, you know, because it, you know, comes from karma and delusion. You know, therefore it's called suffering.
제가
So
나도
there
되게
it's called the nature of suffering.
나도 사체 녀레지 pom보도 둥가라고 말이야. 둥가와라 해서.
So like the body, you know, the contaminated aggregate itself is not a suffering. It's a nature of suffering.
Got it?
Well, then, how come when you enumerate true sufferings, the third suffering is the pervasive compounded suffering? So that's why I say it's mutually inclusive, the nature of suffering and suffering.
got it.
One is one, it's necessarily the other.
What is it?
What are you saying? You're saying like the all pervasive suffering is a nature of suffering and it's a suffering. Therefore, suffering and nature of suffering are mutually inclusive.
And yeah, I am saying that nature of suffering and suffering are mutually inclusive because
No. Yeah. Why
We just talked about it, right? We just talked about this. If there's suffering, then it has to be consciousness. But for the nature of suffering, it doesn't have to be consciousness. So they're different. Can't be mutually exclusive. If it's mutually inclusive, then it has to be whatever the other one is. This one has to be that.
Remember? 나도 사체 녀레지 pom보도 둥가와인데요. 내가도 주소 빼자 돈이 왔어.
So like we talked about, right? Just now we talked about the contaminated aggregate, like our body, you know, that came from the karma and delusion. It's the nature of the suffering. It's not consciousness. It's not suffering.
But don't we call that suffering, the third type of suffering
No.
in true sufferings?
No. 맞나 저도 그런 그래 저한테 동안 영화 되게 되지는데 저한테 동안 고 말해 그런 저한테 동안 말해 저한테 동안 세는데 된데 사실 얘는지 봉보라네 또 스세는 만년에 말에 제등이 대지지까지 저 동안들 아니 저한테 동안
So that aggregate itself is not the all pervasive suffering, you know. So because of that, we go, you know, we have, you know, because we have that contaminated aggregate, therefore we, you know, go through the suffering, and that because we have that, If we didn't have that, we would not go through the suffering. So that's why
Because
having itself becomes, like a suffering, because through that we go through this, through that we experience the suffering. So as long as you have this contaminated aggregate, no matter where you are born, like in the peak of the existence to the hell without respite, when you have this aggregate, contaminated aggregate, then you go through the suffering. So that is the all pervasive suffering.
Right? Are you sort of confused?
I mean, I see the distinction that you're making, saying that suffering is a feeling, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's a consciousness
exactly.
only, whereas
Doesn't matter, whatever it doesn't matter, just feeling.
You know, you can have object, but
Lagba chedugun che yorada, lagba chewe dene karsa nazo ingora.
Yeah,
Lagba chewe nazo di lagba mena yo marti lagba.
Ale te yoma, te yola. Lagba yona yoma de na
Lagba
lagba
dinge nge shago nge
yona.
chama pesha gorda.
Ale
Lago ti lagora manten mazor.
yeah, che da ko phongbo ji do inda dar phaje shode.
Yeah, so like you have a hand, right? You have a hand, and therefore you will experience the suffering from the hand. Like the hand, the broken hand, the suffering of broken hand comes from the hand. Without a hand, there will be no suffering of broken hand. It's like that. You
Not
get a
because-
headache because you have a head. That's why you get a headache. So that so that itself, because you have the head, therefore you get the headache. Otherwise, you know. So that's the all pervasive suffering,
Okay, Lulas, we are not
which
going
is
to
much
finish
more
today,
difficult to
okay?
understand among all the sufferings. That's why.
Can I ask one question about
Yeah.
it? Because oftentimes you see the second seal said all contaminated phenomena are suffering, and sometimes you see it all contaminated phenomena are in the nature of suffering. I mean, has anybody else seen it both ways?
알았어요?
네, 나 4.3주 동화 왔어요.
어,
And then I Indian 알아 본적 4.3주 동화를 라면서 all contaminated phenomena are suffering, or in the nature of suffering. It should be nature of the suffering, right? Because
예, 내추럴 서브. 사체도 이제 동화와서 내추럴 서브라고 그랬어.
You can
it cannot be suffering, If it is suffering, then there has to be consciousness. It has to be feeling.
레다 뇨모 왕거 쇼비 추가연 바탈라야 사체라 그랬어. 대 동화 그랬어. 다 대고고다.
So it's called contaminated because it is it came from it came from the karma and delusion. So anything that came from karma and delusion is contaminated. It's not pure, because it came from the karma and delusion. So anything that is contaminated is in the nature of suffering. It's not suffering, but in the nature of suffering.
네 동화 그랬어.
Like my glasses are are in the nature of suffering,
얘나 동화 말했어.
but not suffering.
가르치나 시바 말을 왔어. 솔직히.
Why not suffering? Because it's not consciousness.
동화에는 시바인 거고 다 대초도 할 것이야.
So if it is suffering, it has to be consciousness. Let's understand that, okay?
오케이, 따따다 드라 당고 주제도 드라 좀 저도 양주 때 장쇼와. 나도
Yeah, so-
가셔다. 아 대리미 저도 빼셔. 저도 하고 또 빼나. 빼나 내 미셰데 미셰 맞아 빼나. 내지진 내 차다고 돼. 내지진 내 차다고 돼. 동화와니가 있어. 빼나 내지 더 동화와니가 있어.
So for example, so now I'm at the end. You can do more research on this, but I'm going to give you some examples, like my suffering, right? The suffering within my continuum, the suffering, my suffering, my suffering within my continuum, or my suffering, it's suffering, right? And it's in the nature of suffering. So it's both.
Your glasses can't be in the nature of suffering because no, they cannot be, because suppose it was a 10th level bodhisattva apprehending your glasses. Those would not be able to produce suffering in that.
간세.
So it's not coming from the side of the glasses.
간세.
So can you say again?
I said that the glasses can't be in the nature of suffering if they were, let's say they were apprehended by a 10th level bodhisattva. They're observing the glasses. would they still be in the nature of
that
suffering?
doesn't change the glass. So that's the only different different apprehension, but not a different object.
If we say the
It's not the
nature of
color.
suffering, it has the potential to produce suffering.
No, not it. The cause from the 그런 거 누가 제고 말다. 그런 요소들 내가 너무 우시와서 아니 사실에 누가 말했어.
The glass, is made from the things, that came from karma and delusion. Therefore, it's called nature of suffering.
From its
So
own side.
for it to be a nature of suffering, doesn't have to bring suffering.
오케이. 당이 무슨 되게다. 저기 되게 차도 좀 다시 와. 드라지 좀 다시 와.
So now I'm going to explain to you, my understanding, my thought about these 3 or 4 possibilities. So, but you can still investigate more on yourself for the next time.
오케이. 네 저는 인자인 거 미시요 미시. 미시의 담봉의 인자인 거 자기 인자인 거.
So I'm saying there are 4 possibilities. So I'm going to give you the one that is both of them.
오케이. 나도 소재 담아가지고 초와 동화원이가 있어.
And so, like for example, the suffering, the feeling of suffering in the continuum of the ordinary being, is both suffering and nature of suffering.
다 동화원인데 레니 영어 챔베셔 다 그렇지.
So why it is the nature of suffering? Because it came from karma and delusion.
아니 다 동화인데 그러나 다 좋아 동화가 랍소.
And because it's a suffering, because it is the consciousness that's feeling unhappy, right? And unpleasure, feeling.
다 동화만이 되게 시작인다요.
So now that which is the nature of suffering but not suffering.
당이 믹시에도 동화만 있어.
So my glasses, that's the nature of suffering but not suffering.
아니 동화와인데 레니 영어 챔베셔.
So there's the nature of the suffering because it came from karma and delusion.
아니 동화만인데 시바만 베셔.
It's not suffering because it is not consciousness.
다 녀라 자주도 다 동화만 봐 이거 대대 가래요.
So that which is a suffering but not in the nature of suffering. Now you have to give an example of that. That's a little bit difficult.
오케이. 대 아니 녀랑 법에질라 다 미시바 끄시비 오보 가로 미시바 끄시비 아니 초동한테 라요 까지.
Mishiba Kuchiba.
미시바 끄시바 까지 녀랑 법에 인도 법에 인도 돌아온 베질라야 이 초동하지 거다. 이 동아리스. 이 동아와 마이스.
So that one is a little bit difficult because we don't really understand that. But anyway, so like the hero's arhat, like the hero's practitioner on the path of hero's path of seeing, arhat on the hero's path of seeing, has a suffering of not knowing. Suffering of,
간지 근데 간지 초동하지 대표잖아요. 근데 요라 간지 초동하지 온 거를 대 동아 인장 동아와 많이.
that suffering, that suffering of not knowing which knows everything, suffering of not knowing which knows everything. So that's kind of suffering, but there's a suffering, but that's not a nature of suffering, but because that did not come from the karma and delusion. So in the continuum of the Arya, Arya being Arhat, and I'm not Arhat, Arya being, who have realized emptiness directly and who does not create any more karmas.
다 간지 이제 다대 나도 무스탐나가서 설명해야 될 거 간지 배자 그런 간지 이제라 레다 녀모 좀 주요 말했어. 레다 녀모 좀 말했어. 람 컴퓨터 주시고 이나 초와 동아지 요랬어.
So that kind of suffering, so that kind of suffering, that kind of feeling of unsuffering, it's a suffering, but it's not in the nature of the suffering because it does not come from the karma and delusion.
오케이, 다 이제 많이 돼.
So that is that now, okay? So you got that right, so that which is neither. Can you give an example of that which is neither?
He doesn't get it yet.
I just know I get it what you're saying, but I don't understand how you could be calling it suffering if it's
단단단 매력 지사 좋아가로. 이제 망이데 이제 상제 파베지제 남제다고데 동아와 말에 동아니자 말에.
Like that which is neither is the enlightened mind, like Marian said, right? The enlightened mind. And as an enlightened mind is not suffering and not in the nature of suffering.
나도 시요. 제가 다 전화도 때 내하고도 두세네. 다야 저도 파도야 다시와.
So that is my understanding, but you don't have to accept or agree with that. You can still investigate more on that.
동아이나 시바이 찹스 동아는 시바이 고스. 다 자세자 다 지게다.
So if it is suffering, it has to be consciousness. If it is suffering, it's necessarily consciousness. You can confirm that 100%.
And 동아와는 시바이 고스 시바이 마찹스 시바이 요스.
But for the nature of the suffering, it's not necessary to be consciousness, because there are things that are nature of suffering, but not consciousness.
제가 동아와 인가와 마이.
And therefore they are not contradictory,
아니 된치가 마이.
but not mutually inclusive either.
아니 된치는 무슨 뜻이 돼요 말이.
So if it is a contradictory or mutually inclusive, then you can't think about any of the either 3 or 4 possibilities.
Okay. 제가 yeah. Okay, like that. Okay. Still study. Okay. Then I'm going to. We are not finished your homework. I'm going to add another homework. Okay. You got it. We not finish last week homework, but still we study. Okay. Another homework is karo. 아니 대천지 전담에 가다다. 근데 대천 반이 저와가리. 뭐 가세요, 달라.
So what is the difference in between Mahayanist and one who propounds the Mahayana tenets?
Okay.
How many possibilities are there?
아니 대문지 전담에 가다다. 아니 대매 반이라 무슨 가세요.
And then how many possibilities are there between Hinayanist and one who propounds the Hinayana tenet?
Okay. This is the homework, okay? Today's homework. But we have 4, right? 3 or 4 last week.
Three questions.
Okay, I think that now we don't have time. Your time's gone. You guys will go far away. But we're going to still study that one, okay? Next week. But try to more understand solving and nature solving more different, okay? If you have the mind, if you think, oh, the 5 arrogant, right? We say it is nature of solving, it is not solving. But you think this is a solving, then solving have to become mind. Okay? 5 arrogant is more not mind.
But more than mine, yeah. I mean,
They're not.
they're instances of the 5 aggregates that are mine.
제가 전화도 간제 안다죠. 동아에는 시바인 고래 준도 삼고돼.
So do you think like if it is suffering, it has to be a consciousness?
Yes.
We didn't. No.
Yes, but.
Okay, yes, but yes, but
Yes.
no, but
There isn't any suffering.
Okay, that's true, right? Yeah, 나도 사천년이 부모도 시발 동아래 왜?
So what about the contaminated aggregates? Is that suffering?
Yes.
시발에 왜? It is a consciousness.
Is it consciousness?
Well, I guess I keep thinking about the 3rd type of suffering, and
말이야, third suffering 때 그도 pom봉하고 말이야. pom봉은 사천년이 pom보도 여와 인자 토스제네 마님에가 내게 강이 동안이야 좋아. 동아들 아니 저거지 동안라 그러와. 대 동아들까지 가와도 찹대요 그래서.
So now the aggregate itself, contaminated aggregate itself is not suffering or all pervasive suffering. And because you have that, therefore you are prone to the suffering. So wherever you are, So that one that's perverted. It's like perverted from all the way up, to the peak of existence, all the way down to the hell without response. So as long as you have that contaminated aggregate, you're prone to suffer.
Okay, think that. This is the second week, right? We have 2 more weeks. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to go over time. Anyway, it's good to study more and also try to think about for Garo.
So that uncommon assertion, about of the the Vaibhashika school, Vaibhashika's assertion, you have to understand that, right? What do they assert? And what do they assert separate, or different from other schools? So you have to understand that.
Okay. Okay, now we stop. Okay, you get nobody become pass to do homework. Sorry to say that.
This guy's said 4 possibilities.
But you have to, the softening up to consciousness, nature softening is not necessary consciousness. Because with we have the 4 Garo, Dembashina Yoa. Mato, Dunga, Tunga, Damit Yoa.
동화 때문에 해주시더라.
Dunga, Dunga, then you young was Sajini Bombose.
Yeah, the 4 the 4 attributes of the true suffering, we talk about in the 4 noble truth, the true suffering. There are 4 attributes of the true suffering, as it says, the suffering. Sorry, impermanence and suffering, and empty and selfless, right?
Take out that they would do the Lama Jusimba son Captain Bushidega, no channel, and Demashi Kadula.
That is explained in the first chapter, of the ornament of clear realization. There's the commentary the upper commentary by Jizun Shogidan.
That Lamro to Kawan, you get that thing it on the same tango.
Yeah, so that is also explained in the Lamrim teachings as well.
Okay. Okay, now we stop. Thank you. Yeah. I'm more confused. Thank you.
Page 39. Ji Puki Juki Meko River taken the Sangi to make the Uagi, Dokun Nambaki Naka Pashu. It's on Namikute Rapin Ching, not to make to give a gun, no some to make a vessel. Yedam Guru Ratna Mandavatam Griyatayami. So it's small life prayer. That snow mountain and circle land source of benefit and joy, may Lord Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezig remain in life till samsara's end. As open as long my prayer. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as a bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading my best victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers honoring the 3 jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please live long. Vacation prayer. For this virtue, may I swiftly, having in Kurukulla state, place each and every sentient being without exception in that state. Precious supreme Bodhi mind, may it where unborn arise and where born never decline, but increase forevermore. Need made say we tension and resting, remaking they one for down there. Jin Gepe to Ye Songkapa, O Sangate, Java Somate.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Good job. Good job. Good passion.
Announcements. There's a Medicine Buddha Puja, 4 o'clock on Saturday. Please come join us, and then there's class on Sunday, and that's it. Otherwise, keep an eye on the calendar. And thank you, Geshe. Thank you, Damchula.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good night. You study more.
Cao Thanh Trì Geshe.
Thank you, Guardian Chair.